This is my true story. I buried my only son in 1997. I saw the wreck, the ashes, the coffin, and I believed I had lost everything. For years I talked to his grave, told him about my days, my pain, my loneliness. But last week, after 28 years, the hospital called me and said, "Your son wants to meet you." I couldn't breathe. My world froze. The son I buried was alive. What I found next broke me all over again. Before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And please subscribe so my stories can reach more people. From the day he was born, my son became my reason to live. I didn't have much, not money, not comfort, not even proper shoes most days. But I had him. I carried him on my shoulders to school, even when my back ached. I worked long hours in factories, in fields, anywhere that would give me a few coins to feed him. I skipped meals so he could eat. I stayed awake at night just to make sure he was warm. I didn't care about myself anymore. Every pain I went through felt smaller when I looked at his smile. That smile was everything I ever wanted from life. I remember watching him grow, tall and smart, always curious, always asking questions about the world. I used to dream he would become a man greater than me, a man who wouldn't have to beg or struggle, who could stand with pride. I worked like a machine just to give him that chance. My hands cracked and bled, but I never stopped. I would come home exhausted, and he would run to me with excitement, showing me his school grades, telling me he wanted to make me proud. And I believed him. I believed he meant it when he said I was his hero. We didn't have much, but we had each other. He never saw the sacrifices, he just saw the love. I never told him how many nights I cried in silence because I couldn't buy him what he wanted. He never knew how many times I lied, pretending I wasn't hungry so he could eat the last piece of bread. That's what fathers do. We carry the pain quietly so our children can grow without it. He was my hope, my light, my reason to wake up each morning and face another hard day. Every coin I earned, every dream I had, was tied to him. People in the village used to laugh at me. They said I spoiled the boy. They said one day he would leave me behind, but I never believed it. I used to say, a son never forgets the hands that raised him. I was wrong. Life has a way of turning love into lessons. I just didn't know my lesson would come in the hardest way possible. When he got older, he started dreaming of the city. He wanted to make money, to live big, to wear nice clothes, to drive fast cars. I supported him, even when it hurt to let him go. I sold my tools, my small patch of land, everything I owned just to help him start. I told him to never forget where he came from. He hugged me before leaving and promised he'd come back for me. That promise became my heartbeat. I waited for his letters, for his calls, for any word that he was doing okay. But weeks turned into months, and months into years, and still nothing came. I kept telling myself he was just busy, that he'd return once he made it. I never stopped believing in him. And then, one rainy night, the police came. I still remember the knock on the door, the way their eyes looked when they asked if I was his father, the way their words fell like stones. "There's been an accident." I fell to the ground. I couldn't breathe. My chest burned. They said the car was destroyed, that the fire was too strong, that no body could be found. They said there was nothing left but metal and ash. And still, I refused to believe it until I saw the wreck myself. When I saw what was left, I felt my world collapse. My only son, the boy I worked and bled for, was gone. That day, my heart died with him. I stopped laughing. I stopped dreaming. I stopped living like a man. Every breath after that was just survival. I used to visit his grave and talk to the ground like it could hear me. I told him about the crops, about the rain, about how quiet the house had become. I told him I was proud of him, even though he wasn't there to hear it. I lived my life as a man with half a soul, because the other half was buried with my son. It was the year 1997. I still remember that day as if it happened yesterday. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that feels like something bad is coming. The rain had been falling since morning, heavy and cold. I was at home fixing the roof when I got the call from a neighbor. He said there was a car accident on the highway, not far from town. He said the car matched the one my son drove. My knees went weak. I dropped everything and ran through the mud and rain until I reached the road. When I got there, I saw the smoke first. Thick, black smoke rising into the sky like the world itself was burning. People were standing around, faces pale, eyes wide, whispering. I pushed through them, shouting his name, my voice breaking with fear. The police held me back, but I saw it, the car crushed, twisted, and burning. Flames were still eating what was left. I tried to run to it, but they stopped me. I could smell the fire, the metal, the gasoline. That smell still haunts me. I shouted that my son was inside, but they said no one could have survived it. I didn't believe them. I wanted to see for myself. Hours later, when the fire finally died down, they searched through the wreck. They didn't find a body. They found his wallet, his license, his burnt watch. But no body. They said the fire must have destroyed everything. I couldn't think. My mind shut down. They asked me to confirm the items, and when I saw the watch I had given him on his 18th birthday, my heart broke completely. That was all that was left of my son. A piece of metal, black and cold. I remember standing in the rain, staring at the wreck, feeling like the ground was opening beneath me. I wanted to die right there. I wanted the rain to drown me. Nothing mattered anymore. Days later, they handed me a death certificate. I didn't even want it. What use is a paper when the person it names is gone? But everyone said I had to bury something. They said it would help me move on. So I bought a coffin, an empty coffin. I buried ashes that weren't even his, just to have a place to cry, a place to kneel, a place to pretend my son was resting. The whole village came to the funeral. They said kind words. They brought food, flowers, prayers. But none of it reached me. I couldn't feel anything. It was like I was watching a play I didn't belong in. I stood there staring at the coffin thinking, this isn't real. He's not inside. He can't be. But no one believed me. For years, that grave became the center of my life. I went there every week. I cleaned the headstone, changed the flowers, talked to him like he was still alive. Sometimes I stayed there for hours, just sitting, waiting for an answer that never came. The seasons changed around me. The grass grew, the flowers wilted, the sky turned from blue to gray and back again. But my pain stayed the same. Every time I left the cemetery, I felt like I was abandoning him again. People told me to let go, but how do you let go of your own blood? How do you let go of your child? The crash didn't just take my son. It took everything. The house went quiet. I stopped cooking, stopped fixing things, stopped caring if I lived or died. My friends stopped visiting. They didn't know what to say anymore. Some said time heals everything. They were wrong. Time doesn't heal the kind of wound that cuts through a father's soul. It only teaches you how to hide it better. Every night before I slept, I saw the fire again. Every dream started with the sound of rain and ended with his name on my lips. I used to pray to see him just once more, even for a second, even if it was only in a dream. But that prayer went unanswered for 28 years, until last week. For years after that day, the grave became the only thing that kept me breathing. I went there because I didn't know what else to do. Every Sunday, every birthday, every holiday, I walked to that small piece of ground that carried his name. I would sit beside it with a small stool and talk like he was sitting next to me. I told him about the weather, about the noise in the neighborhood, about the bills I couldn't pay. Sometimes I just sat in silence, staring at the headstone until my eyes burned. I couldn't cry anymore. My tears had run out long ago. The grave was supposed to bring peace, but it only reminded me of the emptiness I was living with. The worst part was knowing that there was nothing inside that coffin. I had buried air, dirt, ashes that weren't even his. Every time I looked at that grave, I felt like I was lying to myself. People who passed by would see me sitting there and think I was talking to my son. They didn't know I was talking to nothing, just soil, just silence. Sometimes I wanted to dig it open, to see for myself, to make sure. But what would I find? Nothing, just emptiness. The same emptiness that lived inside my chest. I remember one winter when snow covered everything, even his grave. I came with a broom, brushing off the cold from his name so I could see it again. My fingers were numb, but I didn't care. I needed to see his name. That piece of stone was the only proof that he had ever existed, that someone like him had been part of my life, that I hadn't dreamed him. The people in the cemetery started to know me. The caretaker would nod when he saw me coming. He once said, "You're a strong man." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wasn't strong. I was just alive. And that's not the same thing. I spoke to that grave about everything I couldn't tell anyone else. When I was hungry, when I was sick, when I was tired of waking up alone, I told him I didn't go there for comfort. I went there because it was all I had left. Sometimes when the wind blew, I imagined it was him answering me. I imagined his voice telling me he was fine, that I should stop crying, that I should go home. But the wind always faded, and the silence returned. That silence was heavier than death itself. There were days I thought about ending it all, just lying down beside that grave and letting the earth take me too. I was already half dead inside, but something stopped me every time. Maybe the hope that he could still hear me somehow, somewhere. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was love, I don't know. But I kept coming back, year after year. The grass grew taller. The stone started to fade. The flowers died faster than before. But I stayed. That grave became my world. Friends stopped asking me to join them for tea or dinner. Family stopped calling. They said I was obsessed. They said I was wasting my life talking to a stone. Maybe they were right, but I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to live in a world where my son didn't exist. I had built my whole life around being his father. When he died, I didn't know who I was anymore. The grave gave me an identity again. I wasn't a man anymore. I was a father in mourning. That was all I had left. Sometimes children from the village would come to the cemetery playing and laughing. I used to get angry at first. I wanted them to be quiet, to respect the dead. But one day I realized I wasn't angry because they were loud. I was angry because they were alive. Because their laughter reminded me of the sound I missed most in the world, the laughter of my son. I would have given everything just to hear it once more. But graves don't laugh. They don't speak. They only listen. 28 years passed that way, me and an empty grave. Talking, waiting, pretending. I thought that was how my story would end. An old man sitting by a piece of stone until death finally brought peace. I never imagined that the silence I lived with for almost 3 decades would break with a single phone call. The call that changed everything. It was a normal morning. Cold, quiet, like every other day I had lived for years. I was sitting by the window with a cup of weak tea, staring at the road. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer. Hardly anyone ever called me anymore. But something in my chest told me to pick it up. When I said hello, I heard a calm voice on the other side. A woman. She said she was calling from the hospital. I thought maybe they were asking for a donation or calling the wrong number. But then she said my name, my full name, and her tone changed. She spoke softly, slowly, like someone handling something fragile. "Sir," she said, "your son wants to meet you." For a moment, everything around me stopped. The air, the sound, even my heartbeat. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I thought I had misheard. I asked her to repeat, and she said it again. My son wanted to meet me. My first thought was that it was a cruel prank. Who would joke about something like that? My son was dead. I buried him myself. I talked to his grave for 28 years. I had mourned him until my tears ran dry. I wanted to hang up. But something inside me, something that had been buried as deep as that coffin, started to move hope. Hope is dangerous when you've already made peace with pain. My hands shook as I held the phone. I asked her which hospital. She told me. It was 2 towns away. She said he had given them my name and number. When he woke up from treatment, I didn't even ask for details. I just wrote down the name of the hospital and sat there staring at the paper, my body frozen, my eyes wide. I read it again and again until it didn't feel real anymore. I spent the whole day sitting there, thinking. My mind ran in circles. How could it be him? How could he be alive after all these years? Was it a mistake? Was it someone pretending? I didn't know. But my heart wouldn't let me ignore it. I hadn't felt that kind of fear and hope together in decades. I wanted to go right away, but my legs wouldn't move. I sat for hours until the sun went down, staring at that small piece of paper, whispering his name over and over like a prayer. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing the fire in my head, the crash, the wreck, the grave. But then I saw him, my boy. Not dead, not gone, but alive, waiting for me. The next morning, I got on the earliest bus to the hospital. My hands gripped the seat in front of me, my heart pounding like it did when I first held him as a baby. I kept looking out the window, seeing his face everywhere, in strangers, in reflections, in memories. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just wanted to reach there and see him with my own eyes. Every minute felt like a year. When the bus finally stopped, I almost ran. My knees ached, but I didn't care. I found the hospital building, cold and white, and pushed the doors open. At the reception, I told them my name. The nurse looked up, surprised. She said, "Yes, sir. He asked for you." My throat closed. I asked if I could see him. She nodded and told me to wait. I sat there staring at the hallway, expecting him to appear any moment. My chest hurt from holding my breath, but as I waited, doubt started to creep in again. What if it wasn't him? What if it was someone else? What if they had made a mistake? Then the nurse came back and said, "Please, follow me." I stood up slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, the dream would vanish. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to walk. The hallway was long, filled with the smell of medicine and silence. At the end of it, she stopped in front of a door and said, "He's inside." My hands trembled as I reached for the handle. My heart felt like it was going to stop. 28 years of pain, of visits to an empty grave, of nights talking to silence, all leading to this moment. When I opened that door, everything I believed for almost 3 decades collapsed. There he was, my son, alive, breathing, older, thinner, with scars, but alive. For a second, I couldn't move. My mind couldn't accept what my eyes were seeing. The dead had returned. The grave had lied. And all I could do was stand there, trembling, as the air between us filled with a silence heavier than death. When I finally stepped into that hospital room, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. My son was sitting up in bed, his face pale, his eyes sunken. But it was him. The same eyes I once looked into every night when I told him to dream big. The same face that used to light up when I came home from work. Only now, it was older, broken, and carrying years of silence. I wanted to speak, but the words died in my throat. I stood there, holding onto the wall for balance. My knees were weak, my chest tight, my mind empty. I thought I would fall. He looked at me for a long time, and there was no recognition in his eyes. Not at first. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my son's face. Then slowly, something changed. His lips trembled, his eyes widened, and he whispered my name. That sound broke something inside me. I moved closer, afraid he would disappear if I blinked. The nurse quietly left the room, and the door closed. It was just the two of us, father and son, 28 years apart, separated by lies, fire, and time. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to hold him, but I didn't know if I had the right. I wanted to ask why, but I was afraid of the answer. He started to cry, and it was the sound I had dreamed of for decades. But those tears didn't come from happiness. They came from guilt. He kept saying he was sorry. Sorry for leaving. Sorry for letting me believe he was dead. I wanted to forgive him, but my heart was torn between love and anger. He told me the truth. The truth I had begged God to show me all those years. He said the crash didn't kill him. He was thrown from the car before it caught fire. Some people found him and took him to a nearby hospital, badly burned and unconscious. When he woke up weeks later, he didn't remember who he was. They treated him for months. By the time his memory came back, everything had changed. He said he saw in the news that a funeral had been held for him. His name, his picture, everything. He realized I had buried him, thinking he was gone forever. And instead of coming home, he stayed away. He said he couldn't face me. He was ashamed. He told me he couldn't stand the thought of me seeing him broken, disfigured, and poor. He didn't want to return as a reminder of failure. So he disappeared. He started a new life in another town, changed his name, worked small jobs, survived quietly. He said he wanted to rebuild himself before seeing me again. But the years kept passing, and shame turned into fear. The longer he stayed away, the harder it became to return. He convinced himself I was better off without him, the son who had died as a success rather than the man who had survived as a disappointment. As he spoke, my heart tore apart all over again. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper. He didn't understand. I never cared about money or success, I just wanted my son. The one I raised with my own hands. The one I fed when I had nothing. The one I dreamed would live, not die. And for 28 years, he had been alive, just a few towns away, while I sat beside an empty grave, talking to the wind. I thought of every night I spent crying for him, every prayer I whispered, every time I looked at his picture before sleeping. All those moments, wasted on a lie, built from shame. He said he didn't call me sooner because he thought I had moved on. That maybe I hated him for disappearing. That maybe I had died already. It took him getting sick again to finally reach out. The hospital had found my number on an old ID card he still carried in his wallet, the one I had given him before he left for the city. When they called me, he said he didn't expect I would come. He thought I had forgotten him. Forgotten him. How could a father forget his only child? I looked at him and felt both love and pain fighting inside me. I wanted to forgive him right there. I wanted to hold him and say it didn't matter anymore. But another part of me, the part that buried him, the part that cried for years, couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at him, realizing that love and grief can live inside the same heart and tear it in two. The son I buried wasn't dead, but something inside both of us was. When he finally told me why he left and never came back, I thought I was ready to hear it. But nothing could have prepared me for the truth that came out of his mouth. He said he wasn't just ashamed of his scars or his pain. He said he was ashamed of me. Those words hit me like a brick to the chest. He said that when he woke up in that hospital years ago, broken and confused, he remembered the life we had, the small house, the hard days, the empty plates. He said he couldn't stand the idea of going back to that life. He didn't want to be poor again. He didn't want people to see him with a father who worked as a laborer, a man with rough hands and old clothes. He wanted to build something new, a life where no one knew how little he came from. He said he wanted to create a name for himself that wasn't tied to mine. He told me he moved to another city and started over. Worked small jobs, changed his name, lied about his past. When people asked about his family, he said his parents died long ago. He said it was easier that way. No questions, no pity, no shame. And every time he said it, a piece of truth died inside him. I sat there listening, and I couldn't feel my hands anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, frozen. Because in that moment, I realized that my son didn't just leave me. He erased me. He buried me while I was still alive. He wanted a new life, but to build it, he had to kill the old one. And that old life was me. He said he found work in a mechanic shop. Slowly, he saved money, bought a small apartment, and started to live the way he thought success should look. He met people who didn't know his story. He laughed again, smiled again, lived again. And all that time, I was still sitting beside a grave that didn't hold him, talking to the air, telling him how much I missed him. I was holding on to a ghost while my real son was building a life that didn't include me. He said he used to see old men on the street and think of me, but he would turn away. He said he couldn't handle the guilt, that every time he thought of coming home, fear stopped him. Fear of seeing what his choices had done to me. Fear of facing the pain he caused. So he stayed gone, for 28 years. I asked him, why now? My voice was shaking. He looked down at his hands and said he got sick again. Not from the accident this time, but from life. He had no one. No wife, no children, no friends who truly cared. The same loneliness that he gave me had found him. He said he realized that no matter how far he ran, no matter how much money he made, nothing filled the hole inside him. He said he kept seeing my face in his dreams, the face of the man he abandoned. He said he woke up one morning and couldn't take it anymore. He went to the hospital for treatment, and that's when they found my number in his old wallet. He said it was a sign that maybe it was time to face what he ran from. As he spoke, I could feel his pain. But pain doesn't erase betrayal. I wanted to understand. I wanted to forgive. But how do you forgive a child who buried you in shame and left you to rot in silence? He had built a whole new life on top of my suffering. And now, when that life had fallen apart, he wanted to come back. Not because he missed me, but because guilt had finally caught up to him. He said he thought about calling me so many times, but fear always stopped him. He said he didn't know if I would even answer. I told him I never stopped waiting. I told him I spent years talking to his grave, praying for him, believing he was gone. And now, I didn't know whether to thank God for bringing him back or curse him for making me live through this again. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I wanted to make you proud." Those words hurt more than anything else. Proud? How could I be proud of a son who erased me from his life? Proud of a man who let his father mourn for nearly 3 decades? I wanted to say that, but I couldn't. I just sat there in silence, staring at him, realizing that the boy I raised had died in 1997, and the man sitting in front of me was a stranger wearing his face. After that day at the hospital, I couldn't think straight. My mind was full of his face, his voice, his words, every one of them cutting deeper than the last I went home that night. But I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair staring at the wall, replaying everything he said. I wanted to believe he was truly sorry. I wanted to believe we could start again, even after all those lost years. But there was something in his eyes that I couldn't shake. Something distant, like he was already somewhere else. I told myself I would go back the next morning, and maybe we could talk more calmly. Maybe he would tell me he wanted to come home. Maybe we could start over, just father and son. For the first time in years, I felt a small piece of hope. The same hope I buried long ago with that empty coffin. The next morning, I woke early. I made food to bring him, his favorite soup, the same kind his mother used to make when he was little. I packed it in an old container, tied it with cloth, and took the bus to the hospital. The whole way there, I kept seeing his smile from when he was a child. The way he used to hold my hand when we crossed the road. The way he used to call me Papa in that soft voice. I thought maybe, just maybe, I would hear it again. When I reached the hospital, I hurried inside, my heart pounding, my knees weak but my spirit strong. I walked to the reception and told the nurse I was here to see my son. She looked at me, then looked down at her file. Her face changed. I felt my chest tighten. She said quietly, "I'm sorry, sir. He's not here anymore." For a second, I didn't understand. I thought she meant he had been moved to another room. I asked where. She said he left. He discharged himself early that morning. I asked if he said where he was going. She shook her head. I asked if he said anything for me. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "He said to tell you he's sorry, but he can't stay." My body went cold. My legs started shaking. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, staring at her like I didn't understand human language anymore. She touched my shoulder softly, but I couldn't feel anything. The food I brought slipped from my hands and hit the floor. The lid opened and the smell of soup filled the air. The same smell that used to fill our home when he was small. The nurse bent down to help, but I waved her off. I just picked it up and walked out slowly, feeling like a man walking through water. Outside the hospital, I sat on a bench and looked at the people passing by. Families, children, laughter, life. Everything I lost, everything he threw away. I waited there for hours, thinking maybe he'd come back. Maybe he just went for a walk. Maybe he'd change his mind. But the sun went down, and he never came. I went back to the nurse's desk before leaving. hoping maybe she'd tell me he called. She didn't. She just gave me a sad look, the kind people give when they don't know what else to say. I thanked her and left. On the bus ride home, I stared out the window, watching the dark sky. I tried to make sense of it. Why call me after all these years just to leave again? Why open the wound only to walk away before it could heal? Maybe he couldn't face me anymore. Maybe seeing me reminded him of everything he'd done. Maybe it hurt too much. But what about me? Hadn't I suffered enough already? I buried my son once in 1997, and now, after seeing him alive, I felt like I was burying him all over again. When I got home, I placed the container of soup on the table and sat in front of it. It was still half full, cold now. I couldn't throw it away. I left it there until the next day. I didn't even have the strength to eat. Every time I looked at it, I imagined him sitting across from me like old times, eating and smiling, asking about my day. But it was just me, just the sound of the clock ticking and the empty chair beside me. I went back to the hospital 3 more times that week, asking if he had returned or called. Every time, they said no. One of the nurses told me quietly that he comes and goes every few years. Never stays long. Never tells anyone where he's going. She said maybe he'll come back someday. I nodded, pretending to believe it. But deep down, I knew some things don't return. Not even the living. After that day, my life went back to silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was confusion, anger, love, and something worse than all of them combined. Unfinished hope. For years, I had lived with the pain of losing a son who was gone. Now I had to live with the pain of losing a son who was alive but chose not to stay. I started going to the hospital once every month, even though I knew he wouldn't be there. The nurses began to recognize me. They would greet me softly, sometimes smile, sometimes avoid eye contact because they didn't know what to say. They saw it too. An old man walking in, asking the same question every time. Has he come back? And every time, the answer was the same. Number. I kept coming anyway. I sat in the waiting area for hours each visit, pretending I was there for something else. Sometimes I would bring a small bag of fruit, just in case I told myself maybe he'd show up suddenly, needing something to eat. Other times, I would walk around the hospital corridors, staring at the rooms, hoping his face would appear through one of those doors. I knew it was foolish, but I didn't care. When you've lost everything, even false hope becomes a reason to wake up. The nurses started calling me Papa. They'd say, "Papa, he hasn't come this month." In voices full of pity I didn't mind. Pity was better than being invisible. Months turned into years. I grew older. My hair went white. My hands shook more. My back hurt from all the walking and waiting. But I never stopped going. I told myself I'd wait until I couldn't walk anymore. I didn't have anything else left in this world except the small chance that he might return. I even moved to a small room closer to the hospital so I could walk there easily. Every morning, I'd pass the same bakery, the same old tree by the gate, the same guard who would nod at me. It all became a strange kind of routine, the kind only grief understands. Sometimes, when I sat there, I saw other sons visiting their fathers. They brought food, talked, laughed, took care of them. I would sit quietly, pretending I wasn't watching, but my heart would ache like a fresh wound. I didn't envy them. I envied the feeling, the warmth, the bond that still existed for them but had died in me. I told myself my son must be happy somewhere, living his own life, that maybe he stayed away not out of cruelty, but because it hurt him too much to come back. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. It wasn't pain keeping him away, it was choice. He had chosen to forget me. He had chosen freedom over family, comfort over conscience. Years kept passing. The hospital changed staff. The nurses who once knew my name left. New faces came, new voices, but the same answer always followed. No, he hasn't come. Some of them didn't even know the story. I would explain it sometimes, quietly, while waiting. My son was here once, I'd say. He said he'd come back. Some nodded politely. Others didn't believe me. I didn't care. I didn't need their belief. I just needed to keep believing for myself. One winter, I caught a bad fever. The doctor said I shouldn't go out, that I needed to rest. But I went anyway. My body was weak, but my heart was stubborn. I walked slowly, leaning on my stick, my breath fogging in the cold air. When I reached the hospital, I sat on the bench outside, shaking from both fever and memories. The nurse came out and asked me to go home. I told her I'd go soon, but I just needed to sit there for a while. I wanted to feel close to him again, even if he wasn't there. Time blurred after that. The years started to blend together. I would look at the calendar and wonder where all the days went. 28 years of waiting, and not one letter, not one call, not one visit. The nurses came and went, the hospital changed paint, the trees grew taller, and I just kept waiting. Some people told me I was wasting my life. Maybe I was. But waiting for your own child doesn't feel like a waste. It feels like the only thing left to do. Now, when I think about it, I realize I wasn't waiting for him to walk through that door anymore. I was waiting for peace, for closure, for some kind of end to the story that never finished, but that never came either. My son didn't return. Not a call, not a word, not even a sign. The last time I went there, the nurse at the desk said softly, "Papa, maybe it's time to rest." I smiled, but I didn't answer, because I knew the truth. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I was just waiting for the day I could stop hurting. The loneliness that came after all those years of waiting was heavier than death itself. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that eats you slowly, every day, until you stop noticing it's there. I woke up every morning to silence. No voice calling my name, no footsteps, no sound of life. The house I lived in was small, just a single room with an old chair, a bed, and a window that faced the street. I used to watch people walk by, children going to school, mothers calling them in for breakfast, fathers heading to work. It reminded me of what I once had and what I lost. My son used to run down the same kind of street, his little bag bouncing on his back. I could still see it if I closed my eyes. The sound of his laughter still lived in my head, but it no longer brought warmth. It brought emptiness. Every night, I sat near the window waiting for something. Maybe a letter, maybe a phone call, maybe just a sign that he still thought of me. But nothing came. I would turn on the radio sometimes, hoping to hear some noise, but even that became too painful. Every song reminded me of the years that passed and the life that slipped away. The food lost its taste, the days lost their color. I didn't even bother keeping track of time anymore. I stopped celebrating birthdays, stopped going to town festivals, stopped talking to people. They all moved on with their lives. I was stuck in the same year, 1997. That year never ended for me. Sometimes at night, I would talk out loud just to hear a voice. I'd say his name softly into the air. "My boy," I'd whisper. As if he could hear me through time and distance, I'd tell him about my day, what I ate, what I saw, how the weather was. I'd even scold him sometimes, the way I used to when he was small, then laugh at myself for talking to nobody. That's what loneliness does. It makes you talk to ghosts just so you don't forget how to speak. I started visiting the old grave again, the one with his name on it. It didn't matter that it was empty. It was the only place that felt close to him. I'd bring flowers, sit there for hours, and tell him everything I couldn't say to his face. I told him how angry I was, how much I missed him, how much I hated him for leaving. And then I'd end up crying like a child, every single time. There were days I'd dream about him, dreams so real that when I woke up I would swear he was in the room with me. He'd be sitting at the table, eating, laughing, asking me how I was. I'd wake up smiling, only for the truth to hit me again. He wasn't there. He hadn't been there for decades. And that kind of emptiness doesn't just go away. It stays inside you, sitting in the same spot where love used to be. It fills the space. It takes your breath. It becomes your only companion. I stopped fearing death long ago. What I feared most was living too long without him. I tried once to move away, to leave that place behind. I thought maybe if I went somewhere new, the memories would fade. But memories don't live in walls. They live in your chest. I carried them everywhere. Every corner of every street reminded me of him. Every young man I saw walking with his father made me ache inside. I wanted to shout sometimes, to tell people, love your children, but don't let them forget to love you back. But no one would understand. People think loneliness is just being alone. It isn't. It's being forgotten by the one person you would have died for. Now, I spend most of my days sitting by that same window. The nurse from the hospital visits sometimes, brings me food, checks on me. She calls me Papa too. It helps a little, but not enough. No one can replace the sound of your own child's voice. No one can fill that hole. The nights are the worst. That's when the silence grows thick, and memories come crawling back. I look at the photo I still have of him, a small boy with a bright smile, and I wonder where that boy went. The man who replaced him wasn't mine anymore. I think about all the years he lived without me and realize he probably forgot what my voice even sounded like. That thought hurts more than anything else. It's a pain you can't explain, a kind of death that doesn't end. Now when people ask me if I have a son, I hesitate. I don't know what to say. Yes, I had one. He was my pride, my reason. But somewhere along the road, he stopped being my son. He became someone else, someone who walked away and never looked back. So I just say, I had a son once. And then I change the subject because explaining that kind of loss is impossible. The grave still stands, his name still carved in stone, and I still visit. But now, I'm not sure who I'm talking to anymore. The boy I buried, or the man who buried me in his silence. I buried my son once in 1997, and I've been burying him every day since. Not with dirt or stone, but with memory, silence, and the kind of hurt that never fades. The truth is, you don't stop being a father when your child disappears. You just start living with a wound that never closes. Every sunrise reminds you of what you lost, and every sunset reminds you that you're still here to feel it. I used to think grief was something you could outlive. That time would soften it, make it easier to breathe. But time doesn't heal anything. It just teaches you how to carry pain without showing it. Now that I'm old, I see things clearer than before. I understand that love doesn't always return the way you give it. Sometimes it dies quietly in someone else's heart while it keeps burning in yours. I thought my son's death was my punishment, but I learned that his absence, his choice to stay away, was far worse. Because death ends the pain once. Abandonment repeats it every day. I look back and ask myself what I did wrong. Was I too strict, too poor, too proud? Did I fail him as a father? But then I remember how much I gave, how much I worked, how much I loved him when I had nothing to give but my hands and my time. I did what any father would do. Everything. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe he wanted more than love could buy. There are nights when I sit outside, looking up at the sky, and I talk to him again. Not to the man who left, but to the boy who once ran into my arms after school. I tell that boy I'm proud of him. I tell him I forgive him. Because even though the man he became hurt me more than anyone else, I still remember the child he was. The child who used to smile just because I came home. That memory keeps me alive. Without it, I'd have nothing left to hold on to. People think forgiveness is for the other person. It's not. It's for you. It's the only way to stop the past from eating you alive. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like if he came back one last time. If I heard a knock on the door and saw him standing there, older, tired, full of regret, I'd probably still open my arms. Because that's what fathers do, even when their hearts are broken beyond repair. We still wait. We still hope. We still love. But I don't fool myself anymore. I know he's not coming. I know he built a life where I don't exist, and I've accepted that my waiting has turned into quiet acceptance. My tears have turned into dry stares. My hope has turned into memory. And memory, that's all I have left now. The world around me has moved on. The neighbors who once asked about my son have stopped asking. The people from the hospital who knew my story have retired or moved away. It's like time erased both of us from its memory. But I'm still here, holding on to the little pieces that remain. The photo, the grave, the empty chair. They're all I need. They remind me that once I was a father. Once I had something worth living for. And even if he's gone, even if he never returns, I'll die knowing that I loved him till the end. I don't fear death anymore. In fact, I wait for it with a strange kind of calm. Not because I want to escape, but because I want to see him again, even if it's just in whatever comes next. Maybe then he'll look at me with the eyes he had when he was young, before the world changed him. Maybe then he'll say, "Papa, I missed you." And maybe, just maybe, I'll finally get to say, I never stopped waiting. Until then, I live quietly, between the grave that bears his name and the memories that bear my pain. My final thought: some sons die once, and their fathers learn to grieve. But my son, he dies every day he forgets I'm still here. And every day I bury him again, not in the ground, but in my heart. Because love, even when it's forgotten, doesn't die. It just sits in silence, waiting for a voice that will never call again.